Hi, it's Winton Churchill with the Barefoot Consultants, and I'd like to welcome you to our Facebook Friday call where we talk about freelancing stuff. And today we're going to be talking about the 5 different kinds of advice you can give that you can sell online. That all these fabulous networks that have been evolving for 20 some years and we came to rely on so much during the last 2 years have really opened the door in a big way for this idea of giving advice on the line. And we'd like to also welcome everybody from our Facebook public page, our private, excuse me, Facebook group, and we've got people coming in from YouTube as we're broadcasting over on YouTube. So a great place to pick up some of our stuff. So we also appreciate those of you that are coming in from uh, listening to this on the replay. About 95% of our listens are from the replay. So go ahead and feel free to put something in the chat if you're uh, have a question, want to tell us where you're from, want to tell us if you're freelancing now or thinking about freelancing, where you are in that decision making process. Happy to have you comment and or ask a question about any of that. So the first place that's so obvious is your career. That's when I talk to baby boomers, they say, "Oh yeah, well I'm a butcher, a baker, a candlestick maker," and they think of their life in terms of their occupation. And hey, Tammy, how you doing? Good to see you here today. And stay warm in Canada, certainly. Uh, the idea of pulling things out of your career is an important thing to do. The career, but there are pieces to this. You know, you have the job that you're doing now. There's advice that you could give about the job that you're doing now. But in addition to the job you're doing now, there's also advice that you've done in jobs before. Like most of us, if you got promoted along the way, you started out as a junior manager and or a entry level worker, and over a period of 20, 30, 40 years, you may have held a handful of different positions within your industry, within your company. You may have worked in several different industries. So you could go back and tap into that experience. Now, you know, the skill of knowing how to type on a Selectric typewriter may not be very much in demand these days, but many other skills, like how to do a PowerPoint presentation, which is something a lot of us did lots of, or writing emails. Some of us had the experience of people saying, "Hey, I'm trying to send this letter to a client. It's a little bit of a touchy subject. Could you help me write this?" You know, they would turn to you to help them write it. You may have never had the job title writer, but you were somebody that did a lot of client communication. You may have done customer service work of one kind or another, where you had to write up descriptions of how to do things. Those are all aspects of that kind of writing and skill set that you might have online. It's also advice giving skill sets. If somebody asked you how to do that job or certain elements of doing that job or how to prepare for that job, you would have something good and valuable to say. So, the other thing I want you to think about with respect to your career, when you've been in an industry, you have an awareness of the major changes in the industry, the major economic ups and downs, what products or services really change the industry. And this all represents areas that you can give advice on, because somebody with that long term perspective is so much more useful than somebody with, just sort of a short time, just showed up here. I'm 22 years old and I'm in the pharmaceutical industry, and a lot of stuff happened before. Not sure where it all fits in the timeline, but I'm here to work, and that's good. But there are also times when you need somebody that has that historical perspective and know that, this sort of drug came along in this time frame, and then that was replaced by that time frame, and then there was this recall, and then here's how we reacted to the recall, and that kind of thing. All that information is extremely valuable in today's context. There are drugs being recalled every day, and organizations are having to face the challenge of, how do we recall them? What do we do? How do we communicate with folks around this kind of thing? And so lots of knowledge, deep knowledge there in terms of that. Now, the next thing is one that most people don't think about. It's their hobbies. And there are really two categories. There are what I would call hobbies, and there are interests. And sometimes an activity is in one or both. It's not completely clear, so don't worry about the boundaries, but let's talk about what those are. You may have the hobby of photography, and you may have invested $2,000 or $3,000 in a great camera and maybe a few lenses, and every time you go on vacation, you come back with 1,000 pictures instead of 100 pictures, that kind of thing. So is photography a hobby for you? It might be. Have you ever been paid to do photography? Or are there situations where earlier in your career, that may be a part of your job? Maybe photography was a part of your job, but now it was something that was interesting to you, and you've maintained it as a hobby. And I just had the experience of explaining Lightroom, which is a software program, to somebody who does photography and image processing and that kind of thing, but they weren't familiar with Lightroom. So they were familiar in general with photographic software, how to do image adjustment and that kind of thing, but the Lightroom product makes it much easier to do that on a paid basis. Is when somebody is looking for freelance advice, they look for somebody that can help orient them for maybe an hour to, how do I use Upwork? I use these other programs, but so many of us sit there and stare at the screen and don't quite know how to get started. And if we can talk to somebody for an hour or two as we're getting started with that software application, usually we can make really rapid process, because once we get over the rough spots at the beginning, just sort of figuring out where everything is, then all that knowledge that we have about photography and adjusting images and making them look good for different sort of printing situations or different environments, that brings to bear all kinds of good knowledge that we can match that up with. So giving advice about something like that. Another one is any kind of collecting. There are antiques, certainly. People collect ceramics, dinnerware, flatware, that kind of thing. They also collect things like coins. That's another big area. And they also collect things like stamps, and it's interesting. If you think about where we are with blockchain and some of these technologies coming along, we're not going to have any coins in another 10 years, 20 years. We're not going to have any more stamps. There's just going to be a barcode on there or something. So those collections are becoming more and more valuable all the time, and helping people understand what they have in their collection, what the value of their collection is, how to preserve their collection, because things like coins and stamps will deteriorate if they're not taken care of carefully. And so the ability to give advice on those kind of topics is very valuable. On the flip side, you also might want to turn to a freelancer if you find yourself in possession of a coin collection that you know nothing about. Just lots of different opportunities there. So hobbies, coins. What hobbies do you have that might be uh, beneficial for somebody else to have knowledge of, where you could help bring somebody along and help them understand something about that hobby? Another one that comes to mind is I talked to somebody that does woodworking this week. So that's another hobby. Just I think I might like to do that. How do I get started? Where do I go? Is there a group that meets locally? Is there uh, whatever it might be that I can tap into? The next area is interests, and interests are different than hobbies. They may not have been lifelong activities, but they could be something like, your church. You can go in on these networks and you will see people looking for somebody with knowledge of a certain religion to validate or review a novel, a piece of fiction, to see if this would ring true from the point of view of somebody that is in a certain religion, that kind of thing. So your religious background can be a topic of knowledge. Certainly, there can be interest in things like meditation. Meditation is something many people practice. Many more people need to de-stress, and helping them just get started on that. Just understand what the resources are. Maybe understand how to weave that into a daily routine. Taking 5 minutes out of your day twice a day can do a lot to lower your stress levels. So, your ability to coach somebody through a simple breathing exercise while you're actually talking to them online and helping them set up a schedule for integrating that into their life could be that's useful information. That's advice that you can give. The other one that comes to mind is nutrition. We live in a world where almost everybody has an opinion of what vitamins you should be taking or not taking, and what exercise you should be doing, and that kind of thing. But there are people, especially now, who have spent hundreds of hours going to the school of YouTube, potentially, or taking formal courses or getting certifications in terms of things like nutrition. And that's another big area where you may have interest. You might have interest in travel. I talked to somebody a couple of weeks ago that through most of their life realized that they had been traveling to the Caribbean, and that was one of their bodies of knowledge. They know all about all the Caribbean destinations and which ones are best for this and which ones are best for that. And there is the opportunity to place on these job and project networks a project that says, let me help you plan your Caribbean vacation. And I just saw one was somebody paid $250 to have somebody help them plan their Caribbean vacation, and which airport should we go to, in which order should we go to different destinations, and when we get to those destinations, what is it we want to do, that kind of thing. So think of the interest you have. What are the interests? What are the things that you enjoy doing, and how do you piece that together? How do you turn that into advice? It is a body of knowledge. It's something that you may know well, uh, uh, or you may know partially. That's another mistake that a lot of baby boomers make, is they think they have to be a worldwide expert in order to know things and give advice, but you don't. You have to know more than the person you're talking to knows. And there are certain situations, certain uh, uh, things that you might be looking at, could have to do with job hunting or whatever it might be, joining a professional organization. There are people that are online right now being paid to give advice about those topics. And so, within your experience base and the knowledge that you have, and all the trial and error activities that you've been through, and all the problems you've solved over your lifetime, there are many, many opportunities that you can tap into to sell that kind of advice. So the next one I want to visit, we talked about career is number one, but we talked the one I want to talk about now is your past career. And the example I have from my own life is that many years ago, I worked between college semesters in a grocery store on summer break. And I learned a lot about the grocery business. Had never done that before, but was there. It was a small store. I was willing to learn. The owners were willing to throw certain activities towards me, as I seemed to have an appetite to doing those. And I left that career 40 some years ago, but I still know a lot about how grocery stores work and how inventory works and how you buy the vegetables and how you close out the cash registers and all that kind of stuff. And the point is that if I were doing proofreading, I would be a much better proofreader for an article that had anything to do with grocery or food supply or whatever it might be than somebody who had never worked in that career. And my work in that career was over a couple months every summer for, I don't know, 2 or 3 years. And so I had that firsthand knowledge of that. So that's something that when I see an assignment that says we need a proofreader that has familiarity with a small grocery, and I'm your guy. And I don't have necessarily the latest understanding of systems and that kind of thing, but many small grocery stores don't can't they're too small to benefit from automation. And the reason typically they are small is because they have some specialty. There's some kind of boutique. And actually, those stores tend to have the highest profit margins because they cater to a clientele, and it's more about marketing than it is about the lowest price for whatever the food item is or the household cleaning product or whatever that might be. So that would be an example of how you could take a previous career. And I would encourage you to go through the exercise of listing the different industries that you were in. Now, you also have domain experience by virtue of the fact that the industries that you're in or the career positions you had may have had multiple exposures to different clientele over the years that were in different industries. And so let me explain. I worked for a period of time for a company called Sun Microsystems. And, you're basically involved in helping people understand how to purchase new, very powerful computers, sort of business class computers, so that they could do new and better things with their customers. And a big part of my work in that area was spent in the aerospace and defense industries with clients that were in the aerospace and defense industry. So I have a lot of knowledge about the aerospace and defense. But when I did this work, also, it was during a time when the whole idea of animation was coming along, computer-based animation, because it was so much faster. And so I had exposure to companies like Disney and other organizations. I was in Los Angeles in the time that were generally in the animation field. This included advertising agencies, art directors from all kinds of different companies, that kind of thing. So I got a pretty good little bit of knowledge about organizations that do animation, completely different from aerospace and defense, although aerospace and defense people also did a lot of animation in addition to the other things that they did. So you get the idea. Another group of people that I worked with was a couple of different pharmaceutical companies, and they were using the increasing power of computers to speed the process of applying for the ability to sell a new drug, which usually took about 6 to 9 years, shaving months or years off that process by using new computer technology. So even within that one job I had in that company, I was exposed to aerospace and defense, uh, animation and entertainment with companies like Disney, and then the pharmaceutical industry with major drug companies that had drug companies. So when you're working in that environment for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, whatever it might be, in my case, 10 years here, 7 years there, that sort of thing, you pick up deep industry knowledge, and that counts for stuff. So I'd encourage you to make a list of what you're able to do, what sort of advice you might be able to give in each of those areas. And the list starts with just listing the different industries you were exposed to. One of the ways I like to do that is go back by decades. And I kind of start with where I am now and, go from where I was now to 10 years ago, and then go back another 10 years in terms of what I was doing, and then another 10 years. And it helps you sort of compartmentalize things so you can bring all that stuff together, and you will be flabbergasted when you see all the stuff that you've learned. And the fifth and final category that I want to talk a little bit about is the whole idea of your volunteer life. Most of us along the way have done volunteer work of one kind or another. I know that when I was involved in the Chamber of Commerce in Los Angeles, we did things with the United Way, so that's one aspect of that. In the local community, from time to time, we do fundraising for different tragedies around the world, clothing drives, that kind of thing. There would be the classic fundraiser. Most all charitable organizations have one or two big fundraisers every year, and through the process of fundraising, some of the things that we had to do was write the fundraising material. Some of that included going on to radio shows and talking about the fundraising that we were doing, that kind of thing. So there was sort of writing of talking points and that kind of thing. So these are things that you pick up along the way. The big one was event planning, because many of these organizations have an event every month, every few months, that kind of thing, where everybody or some subset of the members sit down at a table and have a conversation and eat dinner and all that kind of stuff. So that whole event planning thing. I know many people along the way have worked on things like newsletters for charitable organizations. Did you ever volunteer to do the newsletter for the work that you did? Was there something that you did for the church that you were in? Could be their newsletter, could be anything to do with events of any kind. It could be writing fundraising. It could be maintaining a calendar, or whatever it might be. So looking for anything that you have there. Now, when you start to make this list, and I recommend that you get a spiral notebook, because not every idea of advice giving is going to be great. But if you've got a spiral notebook, you keep this information in one place over time, and you will come up with many pages of material and things that you have knowledge on. And what you can do is you can go onto some of these networks, excuse me, once you've established an account and created an account, you can go in and start typing in some of those names and descriptions that you came up with and see if there is a market for that kind of knowledge. And as you do that, you'll produce maybe, we like to talk about the 80-20 rule. If you're looking at assignments in the 80-20 perspective, if you see 20 potential assignments, maybe 3 or 4 of those will be a good fit for you. And that's fantastic if 3 or 4 of those assignments are a good fit for you and can tap into that knowledge. So would encourage you to, think about how you can sell your advice. You probably have a lot more stowed away in your brain than you think. And you have the ability now, because it's much easier. You can sit at home and get on a Zoom call and have a conversation with somebody. So you're in a position where you can sell your knowledge and time for money. And very important to recognize that and tap into that from that perspective. So with that, pretty much what I wanted to cover today. Happy to answer any questions you might have, whether you're live on this call as we're recording this on Friday afternoon, or happy to, we track the comments and happy to answer any questions or comments you might have in the chat window. So with that, I'd like to say thank you for dropping by. Good to see you. And we will see you, our members, next Tuesday night for our Tuesday night call. And the other folks on Facebook Friday next week at this same time. Take care.